Write a 150-word introduction for my YouTube video story on this title: Racist Hotel Rejects Black Man Billionaire. The next day, he returns as the owner. Start with a compelling hook that grabs the audience's attention and sets up the main storyline. The introduction should establish the tone, create suspense, and introduce the primary characters or themes. Make sure to naturally include keywords relevant to the topic and leave the story on a cliffhanger or unresolved tension for the next part. Also, do not make any headings. Only write story in paragraphs. Also, keep the wording simple and natural tone. Also, make the script human-centric and don't give feel of AI generated. Also, don't create violated content which can affect YouTube policy. As James stepped through the hotel doors the next day, the same front desk clerk who had dismissed him barely looked up, until she noticed the confident stride, the tailored suit, and the small entourage following behind him. Her face paled. Something was different. The same manager who had so easily turned James away the night before now rushed forward with a nervous smile, suddenly eager to assist. James didn't react. He simply walked past them, heading straight toward the hotel's main office. The staff exchanged confused glances. Who was this man? Why was he acting like he belonged here? Behind closed doors, a deal had already been made. What they didn't realize was that overnight, James had finalized the purchase of the very hotel that had refused him. And now he wasn't here as a guest. He was here as the new owner. But he wasn't ready to reveal that just yet. James took his time, walking through the lavish hallways as if he were inspecting every detail. The same chandeliers, the same polished marble floors. Only now, everything felt different. He could sense the nervous whispers trailing behind him. Employees glanced at each other, unsure whether to approach or avoid him altogether. The front desk clerk shifted uncomfortably, her fingers tapping against the counter. The manager, however, was growing impatient. "Sir, can I help you with something?" he finally asked, forcing a polite smile. James turned, meeting his gaze with quiet confidence. "Actually, I'd like to speak with the owner." The manager stiffened. "I'm afraid that won't be possible." James raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and why is that?" Before the manager could answer, the hotel's regional director entered, his face lit up with a wide grin. "Ah, Mr. Carter. Welcome. We're thrilled about the transition." The manager's smile faded. Confusion and panic flashed across his face. James said nothing. He was enjoying the moment. The room fell silent. The manager's forced politeness disappeared, replaced by sheer disbelief. He looked from James to the regional director, searching for some kind of mistake, but there wasn't one. James folded his arms, watching the moment sink in. Transition. The manager's voice wavered. The director chuckled, oblivious to the tension. "Yes, as of this morning, Mr. Carter is the new owner of this hotel." He turned to James, extending a hand. "We're honored to have you." James shook his hand, but his eyes stayed locked on the manager. The same man who had refused him service was now standing frozen, the weight of his actions settling in. The front desk clerk looked equally shaken, her face turning pale. "I'd love to get a tour," James said casually, though his voice carried an edge. "Starting with guest services, I want to see how my staff treats customers." The manager swallowed hard. This wasn't just a business deal, this was personal, and James wasn't done yet. The manager forced a stiff nod and gestured toward the lobby. "Of course, Mr. Carter. Right this way." His voice was steady, but the beads of sweat forming on his forehead told a different story. James followed, walking at a deliberate pace, letting every second drag out. He could feel the stares from the staff, some confused, others whispering behind their hands. They all knew something was happening, but none of them dared to speak. As they reached the front desk, James turned to the clerk who had refused him service the night before. "Remind me," he said, tilting his head. "What was it you told me when I asked for a room?" The clerk's face turned red. She opened her mouth, then quickly shut it, glancing nervously at the manager. Before she could stammer a response, the elevator doors slid open across the lobby. A sharply dressed woman stepped out, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The regional director's expression shifted instantly. "Ms. Langston," he greeted, his tone suddenly formal. "We weren't expecting you." James remained calm, but inside he was intrigued. He knew every executive involved in the sale, yet he had never heard of her. And from the look on the manager's face, neither had he. Ms. Langston's eyes flicked to James, then to the manager. She smiled, but there was something behind it, a knowing confidence. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding," she said smoothly. "You see, Mr. Carter, the sale of this hotel may not be as final as you think." James narrowed his eyes, studying Ms. Langston. The tension in the room thickened as the manager's expression shifted from panic to hope. He straightened his posture, sensing a possible escape from the disaster unfolding before him. James kept his voice steady. "A misunderstanding." Ms. Langston clasped her hands together. "Yes, there's been a last-minute investor, one with certain concerns about the transition." She glanced at the regional director, who suddenly looked uncomfortable. "Until this is sorted, the deal isn't final." The manager exhaled in relief, but James only smirked. "That's interesting," he said calmly, "because I happen to know every investor in this deal, and none of them mentioned a last-minute change." Ms. Langston's confidence flickered for the first time. James pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. Within seconds, a voice answered. "Mr. Carter, the additional funds have been secured. The sale is officially closed." The manager's face fell. Ms. Langston's smile tightened. James turned to the staff, his voice calm but firm. "Let me make this clear. I own this hotel, and things are about to change." The manager stammered. I think we should discuss." James cut him off. "No need. You're fired." Silence. The entire room stood still.